Okay, again, welcome to the purpose of this book, David G. and David G. And this week we are starting, we're going to dive into step 11. So, bottom of 85, bottom paragraph. So, it's paragraph 1, 2, 3. But before we do, David had a good idea. Let's just make sure we read this step. So, from chapter 5, How It Works, page 59. Step 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. Let's do that one more time. Step 11 is sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. Abby, do you have any words from just that reading of the step? She's motioning for wait. Come on in.
Sorry, just a moment. I'm trying to find, there was a very good definition for conscious that I found
Yeah.
last week.
You sure did.
I'm so sorry.
We can come back to it if it's going to take you a little bit.
Yeah, sorry.
No worries. No worries. Okay.
So,
go ahead, David, please.
Okay, I was just gonna. So David read the 11th step on page 59, right out of How It Works. So right out of the gate, right, guys, and the 11th step is talked about sought. Sought, powerful word. Think about we're seeking here. Sought. This is continued work here. This is about exactly what it says through prayer. Prayer is about asking. Meditation is about listening to improve what? Our conscious contact with God as we understood Him. The one purpose of the 11th step is to improve our conscious contact with God. That is the purpose of the 11th step for me. Period. The end. I blew by this so many times, not even realizing the black and the white on the page are relevant as can be. And then it says praying only for the knowledge. The knowledge is so I have knowledge in my mind so that I think better, and of His will, power for my will so that I do better. So I'm praying only for the knowledge of His will for my mind and the power for my will for us to carry that out. I need both of those things. That later in the book is going to talk about that we can use our minds. We have the right mind now. We have a conscious contact with God. That's what this whole thing is about right now. A conscious contact with God. Mark Houston says it's the best. It's like being in church 24/7, having that relationship with power, knowledge, and will. Go ahead, David.
Wait, Ab, did you find it? Come on back.
Yeah. So conscious, last week I said aware, but I found mentally awake. And I wanted to say that definition specifically because of how David says, I'm no longer asleep dreaming, I'm awake, and how that translates in the step. So that's all I got.
Awesome. Thank you. I don't think I have anything to preamble, David. I presume to just get into the reading. You good at that?
Yeah, let me add to what Abby said there. So, yeah,
Sure.
A Russian philosopher says, and I got this from Mark Houston. We got all our stuff from somebody, guys. No original ideas here on this format. Believe me. Sleep, dreaming, I'm awake. That is where I live my whole life. You know, Benjamin Franklin, a philosopher as he was, he talks about most men die when they're 30 and they get buried when they're 80. Process that for a minute. Think about it, guys. Think about the whole thing here. We are now awakened to this power in our life. We have knowledge and power that will flow in as long as we stay in the disciplines of 10 and 11 and 12. These are, and they will come in abundance. You know, we talked about abundance last week. You know, abundance shows up, and this is like overwhelming the feeling that I get about this relationship with God in my life today. This is about this conscious contact with God all throughout my day. And it's about a practice, right? continual practice of these things in my life. This is not a one and done. Step 10 is not a one and done. Step 10 is a spiritual discipline. Step 11, another spiritual discipline. They're going to give us directions on page 86 on what exactly we're going to do with that prayer. They're going to give us an evening and a morning and throughout the day. That is what I'm looking at here. And if I live in those things, Mark Houston says, I guess I'm using Mark Houston a lot tonight. How free do you want to be? How free do you want to be? The freedom that I experience throughout the day, because I'm not imprisoned any longer. This is not about the bars that I'm holding in front of me. There's no bars behind me. There's no bars on the left of me. There's no bars on the right. The 12 steps told me to let go of the bars and walk a free man. And as I've been able to do that, other people benefit from that too. And how can I best meet their needs? We'll get into that a whole lot more as we're doing this reading tonight. That's all I got there, David.
All right, so let's get into content. Bottom of 85. Step 11 suggests prayer and meditation. We shouldn't be shy on this matter of prayer. Better men than we are using it constantly. It works if we have the proper attitude and work at it. It would be easy to be vague about this matter, yet we believe we can make some definite and valuable suggestions. And we did read this last week, but because we really didn't get any further, we wanted to reread it to get us back into 11. So as is often the case, you may hear us repeat ourselves a few times. Ab, do you have any other words in that paragraph?
I just have meditation, which is amusing reflection, close and continued thought.
And this whole concept of meditation, so thank you for that definition, Abby. You know, there's definitely not a one-size-fits-all definition when it comes to meditation. If you've been around a while, you've come to this conclusion. What we're really going to find as we get into what Bill writes here about step 11, and really a little bit of what we already read in 10, is Bill is going to be giving us what he was talking about, how he was practicing meditation at the time that the book was written. Right now, the language goes on to suggest in many different ways that we are to evolve spiritually and to find prayer and meditation practices and mechanisms that work for each of us individually. We're going to see some more definite suggestions how to get started on this. Right? And that's going to be a great part of what we're going to read in this step. Go ahead, David.
So, in the bottom of page 85, so why do I do prayer? I do prayer to improve my conscious contact with God. So this is me asking and talking to God here. And then to enhance my usefulness to others. What would you have me be, God? I'm going to ask questions during my prayer. To develop humility, and I do that on my knees every day. I get on my knees, not because my God is an egomaniac, because I humble myself in front of my Creator, because I am in desperate need of His power in my life. Desperate. My history, my experience from my past tells me without God, because we talk about what it was like, what happened was like now, what it was like without God in my life was a nightmare. It was a crash. It was a terrible experience in everyone who came in contact with me. What it's like now is 180 degrees different today because I have this conscious contact with God. And then what I'm trying to do here is and the question is, when I'm doing this prayer, is God everything or is He nothing? We'll go right back to the text. I got to remember that, right? Is He everything or not? Is He all power? Is He all love? Is He all present in my life? Am I letting it be blocked off by pomp and circumstance? Am I worshiping the wrong things in my life? You know, am I worshiping the big book too much and the 12 steps too much and meetings too much? Am I worshiping a woman or a man or they or them? I mean, I got to be really careful with this in my life today. But on page 55, it tells me where God is. It's deep down inside of every man, woman, and child. I just can't let it get covered up by the things I just mentioned here. So when we're talking about meditation, Bill Wilson learned meditation through the Oxford group, right? And the whole purpose of the Oxford group and their meditation was for guidance and power throughout the day. Knowledge and will, for my will, knowledge and will. That's what it looks like. And that's what step 11 is. How does step 11 end? It ends with praying for the knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. That's what the Oxford group was doing, the same exact thing there. And I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. The only thing, top of 86 here though. It says, "What's the proper attitude?" It works if you have the proper attitude: prayer, honesty, and courage, and repetition. Like, I do not leave the house without my prayers. I will get in more trouble without my prayers than I would if I left the house without my pants. I promise you that. I need to have my prayers. I have never missed a day of my prayers because I am in desperate need of God, the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous too, which is not even close to God, but it's divinely written to people that were brought into Bill's life. But I desperately need a guy. I desperately need a. I desperately need a big book. I desperately need the 12 steps in life. I desperately need a sponsor. I need the fellowship. I need all these things. And these things are all brought to me just because of the willingness to concede to my innermost self that I'm a real alcoholic and I don't have a solution for my problem here. Now we're getting into how do we pray and meditate? And I'll get into what the difference between prayer and contemplation is.
Yeah.
You know, or meditation and contemplation. I'll give definitions of that today. So let's end there and we'll move through the text.
So yeah, I just want to say, you know, it's a step 11 suggests prayer and meditation. So suggest, but like all the steps, they're suggested in the same way it's, you know, suggested strap on a parachute if you're going to jump out of a plane, right? I mean, none of these are intended to be optional. And I think beginning the work, the practice of step 11, I just want to recognize is difficult. What Bill is going to recommend, how we approach it, again, is conceptually simple. It's not a complex practice. When I'm working with a new guy, I say, hey, how about in the morning, say the 3rd step prayer, say the 7-step prayer. If you're feeling wild, maybe say the 11-step prayer, the 12 and 12, and then just spend like a couple of minutes trying to have a calm mind. And if at the beginning, if I'm doing those things, that's actually a pretty good start. But I'm going to admit, I went many years in recovery saying, tomorrow's the day I'm going to start prayer and meditation. You know, like I was sort of mailing it in. I was recovered. I was doing okay. I was sort of just doing the minimums, you know? And I think because I was afraid of what this really meant and the commitment that it was going to take, you know? And I think frequently what happens is people come into recovery, they're very excited to get going as they build up some momentum, as they get into 4 and 5 and then on to, you know, 8 and 9. They get into 9 to get a bunch of those amends done and then sort of breathe this like a sigh of relief, like I did it. I got to the finish line, which is a very dangerous position to get to. Because the way in which, you know, at least David and I have come to understand how these steps are put together is that I get recovered, I get free in the first 9 steps for sure. But it's the living in the disciplines of 10 through 12 that really allows me to grow, right? Not just as a recovering alcoholic or addict, but as a person, as a human, and all the roles and all the characters I have to play, right? Husband and son and friend and brother and employer and an employee and all these things. So I think it's tough, but we, like so many other things in recovery, we make the exercise of it, we make the effort more difficult than it needs to be. So we shouldn't be shy in this matter of prayer. And better men than us are doing it or using it constantly. So we're joining a very elite cadre of people who are spiritually fit and getting increasingly spiritually fit. That's good company to be in, guys. And it works if we have the proper attitude. David, you know, took us back to 55, and I know we mentioned this last week too, because it's so much fun when we find, right, words and phrases that we try to sync up on related parts of the book. So I'll just take you back there one more time on 55 in paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4. In We Agnostics, we can only clear the ground a bit if our testimony helps sweep away prejudice, enables you to think honestly, encourages you to search diligently within yourself down here in my belly. Then if you wish, you can join us on the broad highway with this attitude, right? The attitude of what we just characterized. With this attitude, you cannot fail. The consciousness of your belief is sure to come to you. So back On 86, we're connecting the dots a little bit. So if we have the proper attitude, I would say that attitude established on 55, continuing with everything else we've learned up to 86, is putting us in a pretty good position to succeed and to achieve, right? To act on that searching and to increase how we're seeking and getting closer to God. And yes, it would be very easy to be vague about this matter again, especially if I'm afraid of getting into these practices. Yet we believe we can make some definite and valuable suggestions. Again, working with a newcomer, Bill's giving us definite and valuable suggestions. Why can't we do that for new people we're working with as well? Let them develop their own spiritual path, but this is just a little nudge to get them going. I knew nothing of this. I needed definite and valuable suggestions. I didn't know how to do this, guys. I'm still learning 20 plus years in.
I was going to add one more thing now.
Please.
Trigger something with me. So
yeah, please.
Think about on page 45, it talks about lack of power was our dilemma. That was just 41 pages ago. And now power is flowing in. And since this power is deep down inside of every man, woman, and child, and so this power is available to me, and so I can deal with my addiction, and then I can deal with my unmanageability, which is the first step, which is our problem statement, as David always says. This is giving us solution. We're living in the solution, the world of power flowing into us here. And the last place it talks about that when I'm dealing with my my unmanageability, the analysis is that the last place we all look is deep down inside. It should be the first place that I look. Now, because of 10 and 11 and 12, it's the first place I look. 41 pages ago, it's telling me that I didn't look there. Now it's telling me, because it's preparing me, awakening, not asleep, that now this power is available to me 24/7.
Let's continue. First paragraph on 86. So here's some definite and valuable suggestions. When we retire at night, we constructively review our day. Were we resentful, selfish, dishonest, or afraid? Do we owe an apology? Have we kept something to ourselves which should be discussed with another person at once? Were we kind and loving toward all? What could we have done better? Were we thinking of ourselves most of the time? Or were we thinking of what we could do for others, of what we could pack into the stream of life? But we must be careful not to drift into worry, remorse, or morbid reflection, for that would diminish our usefulness to others. After making our review, we ask God's forgiveness and inquire what corrective measures should be taken.
I have remorse, morbid, and diminish. Remorse is tormenting distress of mind aroused by a sense of guilt. Morbid is not sound or healthful, disease, sickly, hence given to gloomy or unwholesome ideas. Diminish is to lessen and decrease.
Thanks, Ab. All right, let me get us started a little bit here. I want to talk about the mechanics of this before we get into the sort of the spirituality of it. So very plain, when we retire at night, so when do I do this? At night. Well, when am I retiring at night? So I usually get into bed around 8:30. We get into bed early, we get up early, you know. If I'm winding down and my brain is starting to sink by like 8:15, I probably better do this before my brain starts to turn to mush. I don't know what the right time is, guys. I can't tell you it's 5 minutes before I get into bed. I can't tell you if it's 2 hours before. This is a personal decision. But how I talk about this is as I'm starting to wind down, while I still have a little energy and a little motivation, start to go through this process. If you're forgetting a lot, you know, in my experience, I've had some sponsees say this. I'm like, okay, do it an hour earlier then. From whatever time you're doing it, do it an hour earlier. What's the worst thing that happens? And I've got one of my sponsees, Daniel. He's very faithful. It's very unusual. He doesn't send me. He's got a little app he uses. He sends me his 11 step for years now. It's very unusual. He doesn't. And sometimes he'll send it. He'll go to bed early, so he'll send it to me like 5:30. I said, fine. You screw up after 5:30. You say something sharply to your girlfriend. Tell me in the morning. It's okay, right? It's not like it's going to haunt you for the rest of your life. Pick the right time, but we do it at night. And also, we constructively review our day. What's the opposite of constructively? Destructively, right? The idea is not self-flagellation here, where I beat myself up for everything I did. This is an inventory, guys, good and bad. And if bad, we're going to get some constructions about how to handle it. Here are the questions I need to ask myself. Again, I love the mechanics to get started until I develop my own practice. I need to ask myself, was I resentful? Well, I sure as hell know what that means by this point, right? I really learned about resentments in my 4-step inventory. Was I selfish? Well, I really learned about that in my 4-step inventory as well, right? What was I trying to hold on to? What was I trying to keep from me or take from you? Self-seeking. Was I dishonest? Did I lie? Did I omit something that I should have told somebody? Was I afraid? Where did self-reliance fail me? And then how did I get full of fear? Do we owe an apology? So here in the 11th step, I believe the intention is that I do this inventory. I've got God as a little working part of my mind at this point, getting increasingly stronger. The more I let him, I ought to be able to suss out when I owe an apology. But in the event that I don't, if I start to see things pop up night after night, I probably ought to be talking to my sponsor or David or, one of my running buddies, someone who's got spiritual consent to say, here's what's going on. Do you think I owe an apology? Because believe me, I can still delude myself where I know I was wrong and I don't think I need to owe an apology, right? I am still capable of screwing this up. Have we kept something to ourselves which should be discussed with another person at once? That's a really broad concept. I'm going to skip that for a moment because I think we're going to dig into that more. Was I kind and loving toward all? Toward all, including my wife, right? We talk so frequently about we go out into the world and we're wonderful sunbeams to the whole, to everybody. And then we come home, we're toughest on the people that we love the most. What could I have done better? There's always something. Was I thinking of myself most of the time? Let's get real here. I'm loaded with self. Most of the time, yeah. Or was I thinking of what I could do for others, of what I could pack into the stream of life? So the question is, David, as I went through the day today, was I old David that I'm always desperately trying not to be taking, and keeping? Or was I being generous? Was I giving in abundance? When something came up, was waiting for you to stop talking so I could give my 2 cents or share my experience? Or was I just listening and giving an empathic response? How was I serving all of God's kids? I'm going to pause right there, David, because it sort of shifts here. Go ahead.
All right, so start at the top of the paragraph when we retire at night. And I don't know, I have no proof of this, and there's probably some maybe documentation somewhere, but what I already know about Alcoholics Anonymous when it first started, before the big book came out, people were taken through the work quickly. Like day one, you're on your step 1, step 2, you're on your knees upstairs, do your 4-step, come on down, go out and make your amends, 10, 11, and 12, day 2, day 3, at tops. I don't know why we drag our feet today. I have no freaking idea. I was done with all my steps by the time I was 1 month sober because my sponsor knew that I didn't get to God, I was going to die from this disease. There is no doubt about it. And he got me to God quickly through these steps. And I do the same thing with my sponsees. So I'm assuming that this work was being done so that you can do this inventory at night right away. And like David said, evening review, whatever you want to call it. I do mine before I go to bed when I'm awake still. And this process that we're going to go to here is we constructively. This is without fear. This is without favor. This is an evening review, the inventory of this day. This day. I don't get to do the evening review of a day a week ago because I forgot to do it. No. Current in this moment. Why? Because we have a 10th step. And the 10th step is on page 84 in the second paragraph. I'm not going to read it to you, but I'm going to bring up the spiritual disciplines in them. These spiritual words: watch, ask, discuss, amend, and turn. This is spot check inventory. This is where I'm supposed to be at all day. Am I clear in recognizing these things all the time? No, I am not. So why is Bill giving us another inventory another page later? Well, because I can't be taking this stuff, carrying this around with me any longer. I am supposed to be growing in understanding and effectiveness of God's will. And if I am being hauled down by self-will, self-reliance, and self-pity, I can't be of service to you or God or anyone else. So I got to be free of this stuff. So this is why the inventories are so pertinent and so vital to my existence. It really is. You know, because it talked about that it's easier to let up on the spiritual program of action. This is still part of the spiritual program of action. And I know people who've got 10 and 15 and 20 years that let up on the spiritual program of action, rest on their laurels, and they drink again. And you know where they pick up at? Not where they left off at, way past that. And they're dead pretty quick, right? We know a guy right now who died of this. He drank himself to death. An Irishman, great guy. Everybody loved him. You want to hear, and if there's any Irish people here, I love when you read how it works. I love it. Love it, love it, love it. And if opportunity came in a live meeting, we'd be like, dude, would you read how it works? It's like, because it's just the best. But he rested on his laurels. He could not concede in his innermost self that he's a real alcoholic, and maybe desperately didn't he got. I don't know the answer to this. But back to the text on page 86 in the first paragraph. Constructively review our day. So again, like I said, this is a inventory of this day. And then here's the questions, and these are things, and I put a question mark after all these things. I add question marks to my big book. And these are for consideration in the moment. These are not, you know, when you're sitting in third grade or fifth grade, whoever raises their hand the first gets to answer the question, and the teacher loves you the best. I was never that kid ever because I never had the answer. I was always daydreaming about something. But this is not about that. This is about a consideration. Was I resentful? Ponder that. Consider that. Was I resentful? I drive a lot. I drive a lot. And sometimes windshield time is a killer for an alcoholic and a drug addict. That's why I listen to a lot of speaker tapes, so I don't drip into resentment because she didn't do what she was supposed to do when she was supposed to do it, even though it was really not that important. But if I send her thought through my head over and over again, she'll get a little worse. I'll get a little better. She'll get a little worse. I'll get a little pretty soon. There's no content to it any longer. Next one. Was I selfish? Ask myself that question. Was I selfish today? You know, could I have done something to help do something? I was aware of it. I was awake to it. Or maybe I wasn't. Maybe it wasn't in my conscious mind. But now that I'm doing my review, that's why I'm considering it. Was I selfish? Was I dishonest? Did I take a little bit too much from a customer? You know, did I charge them too much when I've already agreed with that I wouldn't do that? I don't know. I have to ask myself that question. Was I afraid? Was I afraid to approach someone about, how about a ninth step? How about, I made my appointment, then I canceled my appointment. I need to say, I gotta, this is all part of, for me anyways, I make my amends based off of steps 10 and 11. This is how 9, because 10 immediately comes into play, and 10 and 11 are how I make my amends anyways, because I've got to have this power flowing in. And then, do we owe an apology? Again, a consideration. Do I owe an apology to anyone? Was I short-tempered with anyone? Did I do something to someone? Did I cut him off, or whatever the case is? Did I not give enough of attention to my grandson when he was, he's leaving for college here on Sunday? I got to give him all the time I can. And then, have we kept something to ourselves, which should be discussed with another person at once? David is like, you're right. That is a mouthful. Dude, yeah. But I have gotten to a practice not to be my secrets being, I don't want my darkest secrets to be my end. I know that they will be. I know that. So I am accustomed to calling. I'll call David. I know his availability early in the morning. If I need to do a 10-step with him, I'll do it immediately. But I also see my sponsor on Fridays, rather around 3 p.m. I don't wait all week to do that. I don't wait all week because I would either forget it or I'll build something bigger out of it. So no, I don't do that. I discuss it with someone immediately, like the 10-step talks about here. And what we're kind of loving toward all. And the key word of there is all. Was
Yeah.
that's the key word. I go into a lot of shops because I'm a service provider and a salesperson, and I organize people and I take care of their needs and of M&O products, and I do all the stuff for them. But some of the guys want to talk to me and they don't have the power to buy. So do I give them the same attention as the buyer? The question is, when I'm awake, I do. Absolutely. But I'm also respectful of the employer because he's paying that guy an hourly salary. So I don't want to take away the guy's time that he's supposed to be working on the floor. So I don't do that either. Is that where we kind of stopped at? Or do we go a little farther?
I went down through the stream of life, but I can take back over for a sec.
Okay. Yeah, please do.
Yeah, so I wanted to circle back on the last part of at least what I'd covered, or were we thinking of what we could do for others, of what we could pack into the stream of life. So this concept of the stream of life, and Rob, if you want to splash that up in the chat, there's some pictures of Bill Wilson, right, in his home, I guess his office, where he's got like a little bookshelf behind him. And one of the book, I'm going to butcher the name of this poet, right? But one of the books is written by a guy named Rabindranath Tagore, I believe. I'm sure. R.I.P. He's got this beautiful poem where I don't think it takes a massive leap for us to infer that Bill, because of this poem, used this expression in his book, the Stream of Life poem. I'm just going to read it real quick. Beautiful. The same stream of life that runs through my veins night and day runs through the world and dances in rhythmic measures. It is the same life that shoots in joy through the dust of the earth in numberless blades of grass and breaks into tumultuous waves of leaves and flower. It is the same life that is rocked in the ocean, cradle of birth and of death, in ebb and in flow. I feel my limbs are made glorious by the touch of this world of life, and my pride is from the life throb of ages dancing in my blood this moment. So super beautiful, super powerful. And I can see why it touched Bill. And we're not going to turn this into poetry appreciation. And I did study some poetry in college, but I'm far from being an expert. So at a very superficial level, what this is saying to me, and I think what touched Bill, is talking about there's something bigger than me, right, going on. We got this big giant planet, 8 billion people, and not just the people. We've got everything from the water and the oceans to the blades of grass, and we're all a part of, right? You use my Star Wars analogies, right? It's like the Force. It's between everything, and it envelops all of us. And so what Bill's asking us here, he's saying, let's recognize that my primary nature is, well, it's like thinking about myself and my tiny little insignificant part of all this. Or was like, number one, remembering and recognizing everything that's so much bigger and so much more beautiful, right, than my petty insecurities, right? Those old thoughts, those nasty feelings, those rotten attitudes that I can fall back into if I become spiritually unfit again. Or am I embracing and getting into the world, asking myself what I can do for others and what I can bring to the party, right? Am I going to stay, if I go to the dance, am I going to stand in the corner like a wallflower, waiting for someone to come and grab me by the hand and lead me out to the dance floor? Or I'm going to get out there because I know the song, and even though I'm a bad dancer, actually I'm a pretty good dancer, believe it or not, am I going to just get out there and enjoy and be a part of, right? This is the culmination. He's saying, go through all of these inventory items, suss out where I probably screwed up, and then culminate it and ask myself, did I bring it today, or did I get stuck in a rut of these old thoughts and behaviors and feelings? Right? There's a reason why that's at the end of this list, I believe.
So we're thinking of ourselves most of the time. I don't think too little of myself or too much of myself. That's all I do is think of myself. That has always been my motto. And I'm sorry, because I'm a salesperson and I witness this with other salespeople, and it cracks me up. You know what story stealing is? So if your customer or anyone in your family or maybe a sponsee is telling you a story about their boat, perhaps, and they're telling you what a great time they had on their boat, but your boat is bigger and you've had more experiences with your boat, and you can't wait to tell your story about your boat because he's telling his story about his. That would be me thinking of myself too much. I let him have his moment to share about his boat. I don't have a boat. Even though I have a boat, I don't have to have a boat. I don't need to be a story stealer. I need to be present in the moment and let him have his, not be a story stealer. So that is a one way for me to get out of myself. I don't always have to relate a story to someone else either. You know, of course, in the meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, DA, OA, whatever A you're going to, I'm looking for, did I drink, think, or feel like that person? And do I want what that person has? Has that person had a spiritual awakening? That's a different occurrence altogether. But when I'm alive, my life is not being segmented into different areas any longer. I am in the world of the spirit where self cannot live. It can't coexist with the world of the spirit. So self has to be smashed, dead, over and over and over again. And that's what 10 and 11 and 12 do for me here. And then it says, where are we at? Or we think of what we could do for others, or what we could pack into the stream of life. Like I said, my life isn't like, I have a home, I have a family, I have a car, I have a business, I have customers, I have AA members and CA members in my life today. But I don't segment my life in different areas anymore. It's all balanced out today because in my morning, we're going to talk about this as we get to On Awakening. I get on my knees and ask God to come in. And throughout my day, I'm aware of this presence because I'm not a sleep dreaming, I'm awake any longer. That is the gift for me to live in these disciplines of 10 and 11 and 12. And then I guess we didn't get into it, but we must be careful not to drift from worry, remorse, or morbid reflection. Yeah. When I walk around, and is it okay if I go there?
Yeah, please.
Okay. When I walk around in morbid, worried or remorseful or morbid reflection, it's because I'm thinking of myself.
Mm-hmm.
I can be available. I can't be available to others when I do that. I can't. I'm not present in the moment. And if I'm worrying, it's because I'm operating at self-reliance, not God reliance. I don't have to worry any longer. When I operate on God reliance, there's no need to worry. And then it says, we've already asked God in the prior paragraph to direct our thinking. Oh, I'm sorry, this is coming up. And then it's going to give us direction on what we need to be divorced from. These are the things that are going to keep me out of self and keep me connected to God and not have me sitting in morbid reflection, be worried or remorseful. For that would diminish my usefulness to others. I can see why that would happen. I absolutely can see that because I am not present for you when I'm sitting thinking about myself and self-reliance or self-pity. And then after making a review, here's my prayer. I ask God's forgiveness. And this is what I have to do every single night. I get to do this because I have a relationship with this power. And inquire, ask this question. What corrective measures should be taken? What would you have me be tomorrow, God? Because I'm not taking this garbage into my day tomorrow. This is today's garbage, gone, given to God. I don't have to behave this way. I'm awake, not asleep any longer. Presence of God available to me all throughout the day here today. What would you have me be?
So this being careful not to drift into worry, remorse, or morbid reflection, for that would diminish our usefulness to others. Yeah, and to God, right? If I'm staying in with, if I'm keeping the storm cloud over my head and refusing to put the umbrella up, it's going to soak me and I'm not going to be very productive. So this is a great, this is a big book study, but every once in a while we'll pop into another piece of literature that, that we think is helpful. And occasionally we'll pop into 12 and 12. So there's just a good reflection here. And it's actually in step 10. So let's not get confused. 10 and 11. These are very closely aligned steps. They're both about the expansion of God consciousness, no question. But as we talked about in 10, the most distilled down purpose of 10 is how I go through my day staying close to God, productively, actively, spot check, spot check, spot check. I start my day in 11 and I conclude my day in 11, and I'm in 10 all day long with them. So don't be confused about this from the 12 and 12. It says, when evening comes, perhaps just before going to sleep, again, this is an 10th step, but many of us drop a balance sheet for the day. This is a good place to remember that inventory taking is not always done in red ink. It's a poor day indeed when we haven't done something right. As a matter of fact, the waking hours are usually well filled with things that are constructive. Good intentions, good thoughts, and good acts are there for us to see. Even when we have tried hard and failed, we may chalk that up as one of the greatest credits of all. Under these conditions, the pains of failure are converted into assets. It goes on, it's got some more gold in there. The point here is that I am not to begin retiring at night and then go through this inventory exercise with the purpose of beating myself up and feeling lousy and then tossing and turning all night. That's not what we're doing here, guys, right? This is a mechanical exercise that if I do it repeatedly is going to produce miracles. And how that happens is when I'm going to be entirely ready to let go of more and more defects of character, the more that I can thoroughly and honestly list them out nightly. Because when I become aware of these things, I can ask God, I can do a 7th step basically and say, God, please help me with these things. And I also am going to put effort into not behaving this way anymore. These practices, these mechanics, these exercises that are not that difficult, easy to understand, can be difficult to do at first, will result in spiritual growth if I stay with it. I know this. I'm saying with complete confidence because this has been my experience. Right? And it's been the experience of many people I've known in recovery. So don't beat myself up. Take the inventory and then do what the book says. Follow the instructions. After I make my review, ask God's forgiveness and inquire what corrective measures should be taken. Okay, I screwed up, right? Didn't mean to, had good intentions, still screwed up. How do I not do this again? God, please, right? And when it's happening a lot, again, great opportunity to share it with someone. Sponsor, running buddy, sponsee, who knows?
Yeah, kind of a little history session here, briefly, of course. So I was listening to Bob D. If you guys don't know who Bob D is, he's a circus speaker. He's been sober 40 plus years. Phenomenal talk, just phenomenal. Love that guy. And he's talking about how people used to get to step 10 and 11. So the big book was not a very popular thing in meetings, believe it or not, in the 60s and 70s. It really wasn't. And I'm like kind of amazed by that, right? Because we're named after our big book, right? The big book is Alcoholics Anonymous. We come from that. But people used to think the evening review was the 10th step, and probably because they got it out of the 12 and 12. And you know what Bob D said? It was one for Joe and Charlie. Joe and Charlie made it so simple for us to understand exactly where this stuff is in the book. God bless those guys. They're my first introduction to the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous,
100%.
and they still are.
Yeah.
They still really are. I mean, I brought up Mark Houston, and I listened to Joe Hawk, and I listened to a lot of Herb K and all these other people too. But at the same time, Joe and Charlie, they brought the big book where? Alive, right? That's what needed to be done. And here we are tonight, all studying the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And there are formats all over Zoom and live meetings that are doing the same thing today. Is it odd or is it God?
Okay.
That's a Joe and Charlie reference. I'll give them credit. That's not something I came up with.
We say this periodically every few weeks. If you've never listened, Joe and Charlie, Big Book Comes Alive, you're missing out on a treat. They were my first Big Book sponsors. I mean, they really were. I know they were for David too. So we've covered what we do at night. And then we're going to go to bed and we're going to sleep well because we followed direction here. And then what happens in the morning? On awakening, let us think about the 24 hours ahead. I'll give you guys a break. Figure you sleep 8 hours, just think about the next 16 hours, 1/3 off. Okay. We consider our plans for the day. Before we begin, we ask God to direct our thinking, especially asking that it be divorced from self pity, dishonest, or self seeking motives. Under these conditions, we can employ our mental faculties with assurance. For after all, God gave us brains to use. Our thought life will be placed on a much higher plane when our thinking is cleared of wrong motives.
So I have Thought Life. I couldn't find it anywhere in the 1938 dictionary or the Big Book dictionary, but I did look it up. It says thought life is the health of your mind and perceiving, processing, and adapting to the world around you and in relation to it.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're talking about meditation now, right? And again, I told you Bill learned meditation through the Oxford group to have knowledge and power of God's will. And we talked about two things that make us human. We didn't talk about it, but I'll talk about it now. Two things that make us human is our mind and our will. And it says knowledge for my mind, so I know what to do, and power for my will, that I actually need this power to do these things, and then how that translates into action. So when we're talking about the book doesn't, so meditation is, for me anyways, is directed thinking. It is not quiet thinking, it's not silence, it's not emptiness. So let me give you the definitions of meditation and contemplation. So they're actually they're different, but they're also related. So meditation involves actively using the mind and imagination to gain understanding, such as a scripture of God's love. It can also be a form of prayer, and some say it's a characteristic prayer for those in early stages of spiritual growth. Meditation can involve words, visual observations, and pondering. So that's not saying quiet my mind. But here's contemplation. Contemplation involves a train of thought about something and can also be a form of prayer. It can involve curtailing mental activity, so quieting the mind, allowing the mind to rest, and gazing wordlessly. Contemplation can emphasize self-awareness, self-regulation, and self-inquiry. It can involve studying religious texts or reflecting on religious beliefs. So there's a difference, and the book doesn't really talk about contemplation, and I'm going to muddy the waters if I go there, so I'm not going to do that at all. But the book is telling me in that paragraph is, on awakening we think. Thinking is meditation. I'm thinking about what God would have me be here, centering my mind to the words of God. Now, God, I don't know what God sounds like, but I let these thoughts come in and go, just like a cloud in the sky. If I'm standing outside on a cloudy day, but not completely cloudy with some sun out there, and I watch the clouds go by, just letting them pass. Not trying to control anything here. That's the meditative state that I'm in. Tiny whispering thoughts coming in, coming and going, right? Allowing my feelings, my thoughts, my intentions, my awareness to come in, and anything that I can reflect on. So I can have possible transmission of what God wants to direct me to do. That for me is the meditation that I think the book is talking about here. And contemplation is a wonderful thing. I know a lot of people that can do that too. And it's a plus. It's a gain for me to do that in my sobriety. But we're talking about here that we think. So on awakening, we think about the 24 hours ahead. And then we consider. So consider is a word that I've circled. Big word that David and I use all the time. Consider our plans for today. Before we begin, we ask God to direct our thinking. So there we go. Then we begin to think, and then we listen to our thinking, and then we respond to it with prayer here. So before we begin, we ask God to direct our thinking. That's a prayer, and especially asking it to be what? Divorced from self-pity, dishonest, or self-seeking motives. That's And then the promise comes right after that. Under these conditions, I don't have the power to do that on my own, just like I didn't have the power to remove my addiction, my unmanageability, my resentments, my selfishness, my self-centeredness, or all my troubles. Under these conditions, we can employ our mental faculties with assurance. For after all, God gave us brains to use. See, that's why I think meditation is for allow those thoughts to come in, let God speak to me through these thoughts, and then I pray about them. And then our thought life will be placed on a much higher plane when our thinking is cleared of wrong motives. Again, I would not leave my house without my prayers. I would get more trouble without my pants than my prayers.
Yeah, so David did a nice job there. I'll double down on a few of the concepts in here. So in fact, what David was just talking about, so under these conditions, so that's a big if statement, right? If I follow this practice, then I can employ my mental faculties with assurance. That means I should have some confidence that as I continue to think and reason and use logic, that on the whole, I'm going to screw up less than I used to. For after all, God gave us brains to use. So I just finished a month of facilitating a Monday meeting for Howard and Kathy, and it was a 5-paragraph, pretty tough stretch in We Agnostics. David gave me some big ups for that, which I appreciate.
Dude.
There's a lot of stuff on reason and logic. And, one of the conclusions that we came to over the course of that study is thinking, considering, reasoning, logically approaching life. We don't abandon this, right? I still have a brain. I'm still supposed to intuit and problem solve and use judgment and discernment. The difference here and what's being described, that started being described in We Agnostics and is being described here in 11 is that I'm not purely using reason and logic now. What I'm doing is I'm being supplemented with a spiritual approach, right? This is my 4th dimension or my 6th sense. Any of these little analogies that Bill peppers into the book. I still think, I still feel, I still have a belief system, but I also have, it's going to get introduced, we'll get into it next week. I'm starting to get this new working part of my mind, right? It's as I'm growing more intentionally God conscious because I'm doing the work. And I say this a lot, and I know it sort of doesn't make sense, like as I'm getting closer to God. Can't be any closer to God. I was plenty close to God while I was driving him away. We talked about this. He's right down inside my belly my whole life, right? It wasn't a matter of distance or space. God was always with me. I was just busy rejecting him. So as I continue to accept him and make God consciousness and God serving my primary purpose and taking care of all you guys and all the rest of the kids, right? Now, as I'm thinking, as I'm working out matters, as I'm using logic, it's got a new spin. It's got a spiritual spin on it. So then I go back to the beginning. So on awakening, I think about the 24 hours ahead. And I can't remember if we mentioned this last week or not. It might have been in another talk. Why do we have the retire at night and then the on awakening? If you look at the original manuscript, there was no retire at night. It was strictly a on awakening, getting started process. And it's cool if you have, that big version where it's all marked up and Bill's got his handwritten notes in it. I can't remember the name of that book. I've got it here somewhere. It's so much fun. They insert this concept of concluding the day and then beginning the day. And I'm not sure he says why he did it, but for whatever reason he did. So that's why they're theoretically out of order here, right? But the idea is that I get going, beginning my day, and I consider. How that consideration takes place, as David talked about, that's not up for me to dictate, right? And it can come in many forms of meditation or contemplation. But I am allowed to process using this thing up here between my ears. And as long as I ask God to direct my thinking as I'm doing that consideration and making sure to ask that I don't get into self-pity, dishonesty, or self-seeking motives, it's just going to sort out okay. My results are probably going to be pretty solid, guys. And we talked about under those conditions. And then this last part, just to close it out, our thought life will be placed on a much higher plane when our thinking is cleared of wrong motives. That's another amazing promise. David mentioned the promise before that about how we're going to be able to work things out with assurance. How about that my thought life is going to be on a much higher plane, higher meaning better, more noble, I think, more altruistic, more selfless, when my thinking is cleared of wrong motives. And what drives wrong motives? Old thoughts, old feelings, old attitudes that I'm desperately trying to unload. David, any capper, or you want to let it?
No, I think maybe we'll review that a little bit, because what I want to talk about is a daily conscious practice, which will allow me to have this daily reprieve.
Okay.
But we'll
Thanks,
talk about
guys.
it again next week.
We kill the recording.